next studio, she will be discussing inclusive education in Uganda, and she joins us right now. Good morning once again, Mala. What's on the agenda? Inclusive education. Give us a hint.
Right. Thank you so much, Romeo, for the feedback. And of course, like you mentioned, we are getting into some conversation with regards to inclusive education in Uganda. Where does Uganda stand? And what does that mean for our young ones and even adults who are living with, of course, disability, or we actually say that they are gifted differently, all right? So we're getting into that particular conversation with regards to education specifically. And of course, to just have that conversation, I'm joined in studio by Miss Birungi Faith. She is the communications manager at the Kampala School for the Disability, or for the physically handicapped, right here in the country. Thank you so much, Faith.
Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I think let's start with the status, where Uganda stands with regards to inclusive education. When you look at the statistics with regards to people living with disability, or people who are gifted differently, like we like to say it, of course, the lingo has to be right. We're looking at 4 in every 25 persons who are actually living with disability or gifted differently. So the numbers are high. When you look at that, that means about 16% of the population actually is of people living with disability within Uganda. And education is something that is critical, especially with making sure that they also have an equal opportunity like all of us do. So with regards to the status of education, inclusive education in Uganda, where are we at?
Thank you very much, Mala. I would first like to begin by defining inclusive education, what we really think we call inclusive education and what it is in Uganda. So basic definition, inclusive education is a situation where children or any kind of person that has any learning challenges is accepted and allowed to study in a normal school setting. Now, the question in Uganda comes in is, do our schools really have the facilities to let these people study, and do they equally get the same kind of attention as any other student that would go to a normal other school? And see, we call it inclusive education. We like to throw around the word and say, you know, this is inclusive education. Everybody is allowed to be in a particular place. But basic, you walk into a school and there's a staircase. And so what happens to a child that has a wheelchair?
Correct.
What are the chances that they'll be able to move around school normally? We call it inclusive education, but our curriculum, let me say, somebody with cerebral palsy will not be able to write an exam, because all exams in Uganda for some reason are written.
Right.
So we call it inclusive education, and we seem to have understood it, but do we have the facilities? Do we really understand what it means?
So on a scale of 1 to 10, because I've interacted with quite a number of parents who have children living with disability or children who are gifted differently, let's just stick to that, and they say that when they give them that option of whether to take their children to a special needs school or whether to take their children in a normal school, a majority just say that, hey, I want to take my children to a normal school, because that, of course, will, you know, stretch them a little bit and make sure that they push themselves as well to excel in their own, you know, capacity. So when you look at that, how would you rate the Ugandan schools then? Because you've said that clearly we are lacking, but on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put the Ugandan schools? Because the majority of parents who have such children opt for such schools.
You'll forgive me and Uganda will forgive me,
Right.
but I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably say Uganda is at 4. And that's a very disturbing rate. But a Ugandan and I think this is why Ugandan parents feel like, if I put my child in a normal setting, they will be able to cope.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel it's a lack of probably adequate information to know that this is the situation my child is in, and as much as inclusive education is beautiful, they need to first adapt to this kind of setting and kind of get tools that will allow them to be able to adapt and then get into the normal system. So there's things like occupational therapy, there's things like physiotherapy. If these are started early enough for a child, by the time they're about probably 12 to 11, they can be able to get into a normal school and kind of interact and be able to. But sometimes parents, probably for a lack of knowledge or an ability to know what to do with their child, a child will get into school at probably 6 years or 7.
Or even less.
Exactly. By the time they get there, things like movement, basic adaptability things that should have happened earlier in their lives would not have happened. So it's beautiful for them to be able to be included in school, and I really stand for inclusive education. But have we done the work that we need to do before placing them in these places? Have we taken time to go to therapy and understand that a child at this stage should be able to do ABC, and if they have these necessary tools, they will be able to participate in daily school activities. So I think the question goes back to us in terms of, are we doing enough to be able to place these people in a competitive space with everybody else?
And you know, placing these children in a competitive space means money. And of course, that's where a majority of parents, you know, fail to strike the balance, because you know that a majority of them would not afford a special needs school. The costs, well, assumptively, you will tell us today, are, you know, up there. So when you look at the costs, Faith, and especially for your school, which is quite specialized for such kids, what are the costs like? Because when I'm a parent, for example, and I have competing priorities and needs, I also have other children, you know, needs for the family as well. And I need to strike that balance. I'm looking at a government school, which is saying that, hey, we have inclusive education. And I'm also looking at a special needs school, which ideally would be perfect for my child, of course, who is gifted differently. But when I look at the numbers, they're not making sense to me. So maybe a majority are wrong to just assume it's expensive. What are we looking at in terms of the numbers per term?
Okay, so I take this back to every parent. Every parent wishes the best for their child, and every parent works really hard to ensure that their child gets the best of education. So when God blesses you with this kind of child, definitely there is going to be a different lifestyle, and there's going to be different ways to do this. But one thing we do at the school is when we go out to research in the US and how these people do it, of course they have facilities. The government supports this kind of education at a really large scale. There's literally a whole ministry that handles inclusive education. They get to the point where even when your child misses school, they'll ensure that they'll send somebody, a caretaker or somebody to come through, pick the child, or see what's happening. So in Uganda, because of the limitations that we have, I think not doing anything is not a way to go around it. However, what we do at the school and how we've been able to manage is learn from the people, and then see how we adapt these different facilities with the local staff. So per se, there's kinds of wheelchairs that may not be easily affordable for a parent. So what we do is we come back here, look at it, look at our wood, look at the basic tools that we have around. How can we make something close to what they have and be able to have probably the same kind of facility? So it gets back to information. Are we taking time to read about these things? Because every time there's a will, there's a way. There's definitely a way. And if there's a human being that has this challenge, we definitely have to find a way to work around it. And so at the school, we just keep saying, if I find a toothbrush, like there's people with cerebral palsy will have a problem, probably gripping and brushing, and there's a kind of rubber that's used for that somewhere out there. But if I get I used probably plastic, put it in 2 use, put rubber around it to grip on the child's hand, it's almost the same. So our job is to kind of see, what do they have out there? How can we make it easier and cheaper and usable here? So of course, I think the only place it costs us is taking time to get more information and be able to adaptalize these kinds of things.
So if I bring my child to your institution, of course, the Kampala School for the Physically Handicapped, how much am I looking at per term for one child? Does it vary depending on the case of the child? What are we looking at?
So we have a standard school fees structure, and it's about 600,000
per term.
Per term.
All right.
But see, when you're looking at 600,000, as much as you have the normal education system, we have at Kampala School we believe that there's rehabilitation, vocational, and the formal education system, because we understand that every child has different abilities, and if you understand how best somebody works, then you are able to help them. So it's 600,000, which may look like a lot of money for the kinds of parents that may have these kinds of children, but look at it from a perspective of, if your child is going to come and they cannot move, we will take them to have an assessment, probably at Mulago Hospital. There's a whole section. When they define what they have as a disability, we come at the school and kind of look for a curriculum in rehabilitation that will allow them to become comfortable. So they'll do physiotherapy, they'll do occupational therapy. If we realize that gripping is your problem, then we'll probably use the computer kind of teaching, where there is an adaptable mouse, and probably you can use your feet to type. When you do that, then you are comfortable because, okay, I may not be able to write like you, but I can type out my exam. And some of these children are really brilliant because they know the things that they need to do. And your comprehension may be different from how I do, but when I get it, I get it. So at the school, we try to help you understand that, fine, it's 600,000. But if it's 600,000, have you looked at the ABC that's going to happen for somebody to...
And I like the fact that you take it upon yourselves, actually at the get-go, to take this child again through expert medical examination. You don't just rely on the reports that come with the parents that, hey, this is the status of our child, which is quite commendable. But let's look at the other side of, you know, the efforts that the country is making. We do have, you know, different, we're actually signatories to different, you know, protocols with regards to making sure that we are part and parcel of, you know, the United Nations Convention on Rights with Persons Living with Disabilities. But like you said initially, we have a long way to go. And of course, in terms of legislation just within the country, we do have the Persons Living with Disability Act 2006. What more can be done? Is it making sure that we equip our schools better, or even the policy itself has to be revised to make sure that it's up to date with the, you know, the current global standards? What is it?
I have a lot to say about policy. But I think number one would start with information. You see how people say knowledge is power, and the right knowledge is power. I think what Uganda is really suffering from is the lack of knowledge and the ability to show that there's so much potential in these people. So awareness, I feel, would be the first thing that we need to do in Uganda. Let people know that just because you eat with your hand and I use my food, just because you drive with your hands and I use this, doesn't make me less. I literally have the same ability, just differently. We're differently able. That's how differently. So I think number one, we need to inform, sensitize, have more things going around, letting people know that this is okay. Personally, I got comfortable with this because I was born at the school. So from my childhood, I just never saw them different. I played with them. I played with them. Wheelchairs, it was comfortable. So it's only later that I would go to school and find friends and they find it weird. I say, wait, why do you find it weird? But it was because probably they haven't seen them. And so we would want to be angry at those children, but probably they just don't know what it means. So I think first of all, we need to take that stigma out. If policy can be made to kind of allow them to mix, integrate. Recently I was listening to radio and there was a gentleman speaking on the radio saying he was taking a taxi from a place to a place, but he uses a wheelchair. And the fare was 3,000, but for him to put his wheelchair on the bus was another 3,000. And you're saying, okay, I get it. You work like I work, and you want me to do everything like you would want, and you want me to pay your money. Why am I paying an extra 3,000? Do you pay for your legs? Do you pay for them to move from place to place? So I think government is doing well. We are grateful because Kampala School is actually 20% funded by government, but at the same time we could do more.
In terms of information, because with information then the stigma will be gone.
The stigma goes, and then ideas get into people's heads. I wouldn't want to say funding and all those things are very important, but when we have the right knowledge, then we use it the right way.
Faith, you know, when it comes to education, the teacher to student ratio has always been a hassle. Now I'm thinking, especially when it comes to schools of children with special needs, what is the challenge there, and do you face the same challenge, the pupil to teacher ratio?
So ideally, a special needs child, as opposed to maybe one teacher and 20 students, in our system we ought to have a child and 4 people. Ideally.
So one child
should at least have 4 people looking around.
Playing different roles.
Exactly. But our system doesn't allow for that. So we have about an enrollment of 180 students and about 44 staff. So how do we survive? Volunteers. That's why I'm saying information, because we have kind of had both internal and external people come in to just help in and out of there throughout. So what happens is, yes, we have 44 teachers because that's really what the school can afford to pay for. And it's not much. We all know what's happening with teachers. But then if the right people are told. And you see, very many Ugandans want to do stuff. They just want to support. But for us, even there's money, but what about you? Just come through. If you have 2 hours in a day,
Right.
come and be part of this.
Especially for, I'm looking at it from the aspect of, well, not just volunteers who just want to give a helping hand, but for teachers who have gone through specialized training to handle and teach and equip these children with skills as children with special needs or gifted differently. In terms of the numbers, do you think there's more that needs to be done? Because now you'd go to university and ask how many are actually taking a course in of course training themselves in how to teach children who are gifted
special,
differently. Yeah, but the numbers are still dwindling and actually low, so to speak, compared to their market. The numbers are high. 16% of the population, we are saying, live with disability. So what more can be done to entice young people to take up these particular courses?
I think the responsibility goes both ways.
Okay.
Both for the individuals that are passionate about this, but also for the schools that are creating these job opportunities or these employment opportunities. So number one, I feel like being a teacher in this kind of field is more than just payment. It needs to be something that comes from the heart. And probably, and I understand why very many young people don't wake up to just go into this kind of employment, because they're saying everybody wants to live well. Yeah. And I'm saying, how many schools in Uganda, first of all, do this? They're countable in the hands. There's one for the deaf, there's one for the blind, there's one for mental, and there's one for physically handicapped.
Right.
They're not very many. Second, what kind of facilities are in these places? And it's, so I think, first of all, the way it has been portrayed out there isn't the best, but also for special needs school. And that's why I feel like we're a school that's special, because yes, we are special needs, but are we seeing what the trend of schools is taking today? So they're getting into the digital space. You take time to let your teachers travel out and see what's there. Give them a chance to explore, do the best that they can.
Right.
But if we are limiting them to, okay, you are a teacher, you have a curriculum, and that's what you do, why should I care? Why should I be part of this? So sometimes things we do is exchange programs and say, okay, there's this school probably in the Netherlands that's having a training. We look for a way to get funding and send maybe a teacher and somebody. Go see what happens there. And when you come back, you are inspired. You're seeing a whole new direction. It's more than just a job. You're saying, I'm changing my life every day.
Right.
So I think schools need to take time off to look out for those opportunities, but also brand yourself.
Okay.
People only want to associate with things that look a certain type of way. And we do not have an excuse anymore to look a certain type of way because we are a certain kind of people. No, we want to be seen the same. We want to be agreeable to sit in boardrooms and say we have something to offer, which we actually do have.
Right.
So the way we put out ourselves, and I really get angry when I walk on the street and I see somebody begging. It's not an easy place, but you're making us look bad.
Correct.
You're making us look bad because we have abilities. If you come to the school, there's beautiful material that's created by these people. There's ceramic, there's material, all kinds of things that are doable, and they are. So how you brand yourself
is critical.
Is very, very important.
Right.
So you want to, are you in the social media space? Do you stand? Do you brand yourself? It's not just a website. How does it look? It's not just an Instagram page. If we're doing productions, we don't want you to just come and say, oh, they look nice, so we'll just take it. We have a standard.
Right.
Because this, if you look at this, we have a lot of alumni, people that have left. They are lawyers. They are participating in all sorts of things. So we know we have the ability.
Success stories as well. And you know what I like with regards to just enticing more young people to actually take up such courses and to help us, you know, in this particular gap. Like you're saying, I mean, you guys would call you a private entity, you know, and yet you're still struggling with the teacher-student ratio. It's interesting that you're saying it's not just about the pay, but also the incentives ought to be catered for. As government is adding salaries for the science teachers, they also need to cater for such and make sure that there are incentives just to make sure that more people take up these courses. All right, so you've been in the game for 50 years. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you.
What keeps the school going in light of all these challenges that we've just talked about? What is that inspirational factor?
First, good. Then I feel like we have a team of dedicated people. The director is not here today, but she has been at the school for 30 years. And her 30-year story is is more than just, it wasn't a good pay at the start. She literally started with 30,000 shillings for a pay.
Per month?
And yes, and this happens to be
Oh,
my
wow.
mother also. So if it's 30,000 shillings, you have 3 children, you have a family to take care of. Ideally in Uganda, you'd say, you know what, it's not working. It's not working. I need to find a place to be. But there's a passion. But then there's also, I just wish everybody could get to this school, because when you see the smiles on these children's faces, we always say our story is not is a story of hope. We take the sting out of disability, because we're saying, yes, we are created this way, and it's okay. There's something different. So for 50 years, we kind of look out for people that have the heart for the children. So when you're coming on, what inspires you to be on the team?
Right.
And from there, then we take you on and say, okay, this person really cares for what.
So meaning that you also train the volunteers that come on board? So if I'm green and I want to volunteer, does it mean that you take me through some, preliminary training, so to speak?
So originally you have a basic conversation with
Right.
whatever department we think you want to be a part of. And then from there we see how best to place you. But it's really a learn on ground kind of job. I cannot begin to explain, because there's almost no time to take somebody through all the kind of trainings that they need.
Right.
But there's basics. And I feel like dealing with these kinds of people is just how you do to others what you'd want them to do to you. If you don't even want to be stared at, why would you be staring at somebody? If you know that you need to go to the washrooms and you walk there, and you realize somebody wants to, why don't you take me with you? If you realize that I need to feed and I don't have, I'm not able to grip, anybody that's standing would realize, oh, there's need.
Right.
So it's really a theory, a human principle.
Right.
It's good and
So
good.
what's critical is that passion. It has to be seen clearly, without a doubt. All right, so 50 years in, what are one of those key highlights as we wrap this up? How many, children have gone through this particular school in the 50 years, and what are we looking at in terms of the celebrations? I'm sure it won't be a one-day celebration kind of thing. It's going to be, a period, a whole phase of celebrations. We're looking at the 18th to the 26th of October this year. So tell us more about that, achievements, how many students, and what we ought to expect in terms of celebrations.
Okay, this is the exciting part. So
All right.
the school has been since 1969. And so we have, I think, about 4,000 plus children that have passed through this school and have success stories. Currently, the school has a population of 182 students. And so we're just giving thanks. We are grateful. We are grateful that thus far we've come. First,
Right.
But then also we're saying it's a new level. We've been there all these years, but now we need to let people know who we are, what beautiful things come out of us, and our ability to do just as good as everybody else can do when given the opportunity.
All right.
So our 50-year celebration will start on the 18th of October. What we're starting to do is have an awareness walk. We're calling it a disruptive walk.
Yes.
We just want you to see that we are walking on your streets from KCC here to Parliament, and just letting you know that we have as much capability. So we'll have the basketball team for the persons with disability, and a number of other people in the sports scene just walking with us. We'll have a whole bunch of children dancing on trailers, being pushed around in wheelchairs, and showing you different things that we can do. And
That's the 18th.
18th.
All right.
Which everybody should be a part of, I believe.
Okay, 19th.
Then on the 23rd, we have a space in between.
Okay, so people have to take a break. Yes, I can imagine, because of the activity on the 18th. All right,
exactly.
so a break, and then we resume.
On the 23rd, we'll
All
have
right.
a Thanksgiving service, because we are a faith-based school, and we believe that there's always a higher power, and we are successful because we keep doing the things we do with diligence. So we'll have a Thanksgiving service in Mirembe Cathedral. Why? Because that's the community church where we have lived for the last 50 years.
All right.
And then finally we'll have an exhibition that will happen at the school.
Still on the same day?
No, on the 26th.
All
That will
right,
be
the
final,
last day.
The last day.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is just have a runway, a fashion show showing you this materials and fabrics that we do at the school, ceramic beads and different stuff that we do, but then also exhibiting the kind of education system we use and our curriculums in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of assessments, just to let people know that there's as much information that you need to know about us, and this is how your child can be a part of us. And even if they may not be able to pay all our fees, we look for donors, and we find a way to do a half thing.
So that exists as well.
Yes,
All
that's
right.
part of my things to do.
That's amazing. I think parents just need to look out for you guys. As we wrap this up quickly, website, how do we get you?
So we have a website, we have an Instagram page, we have a Facebook page,
All right.
and we have a Twitter handle.
The name, the address?
So the website is www.ksph.org. Instagram page is KSPH 1969UG. Our Facebook page is Abilities, KSPH Abilities, because we're just trying to show our different abilities.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Birungi Faith, Communications Manager at the Kampala School for the Physically Handicapped right here in the country. Tell a friend to tell a friend, share this with as many parents as possible. We know parents are struggling, but here they're doing something differently to ensure that your child has a bright future as well. We're taking a short commercial break, but Morning at 10 TV does continue. Stay with us.